So it seems like we're finally going to get a real announcement for the Switch 2 very soon, at least if the various leaks and rumors are to be believed, but that has been the most interesting aspect of the lead up to this console, hasn't it? Like, I swear, the Switch 2 must be one of the most heavily leaked consoles of all time, not to mention how long the leaks have been going on. But at the same time, that is also the first thing that kind of has me concerned about the console. Not necessarily the actual contents of those constant never ending leaks and rumors and whatnot, but honestly, everything I've seen so far in those leaks seems pretty par for the course, all things considered. Rather, what I'm concerned about is just how many of them there are and the nature of how some of these leaks have been coming out. Most notably, I think, is the recent reveal at CES where a peripheral manufacturer was just kind of showing off the Switch 2 like it was no big deal. I mean, it almost certainly was just a dummy model. I doubt it even had a motherboard or in it or anything like that. They are just a peripheral maker after all. They're showing off the attachments and the cases and whatnot, not the actual console itself. But still, the idea I'm getting at here is that the sheer amount of leaks that we've gotten for this console, let alone the nature of some of these leaks at the CES one, are kind of giving me a certain vibe. Now, I don't have any hard evidence to necessarily back up this theory. I've talked about this a bit in my community notes, and this is entirely just speculation, but I'm starting to wonder if Nintendo actually didn't originally intend to wait this long to announce their new hardware. I mean, with the current leaks, and I recognize that this information is obviously by no means necessarily reliable, but if what we know is true, the console is almost certainly releasing in the first half of this year. I mean, just from the sheer volume of leaks alone, even if there weren't any rumors of a release date, it would still be kind of insane if it wasn't coming sooner rather than later. And if that's the case, we're looking at, June, May, maybe even April for the release date. I mean, that's way shorter of a window between the official reveal if it happens basically right now and the release than most other consoles get. For comparison, the original Switch was announced in October and released in March, so that's about 6 months of lead up, which is pushing it even if the Switch 2 is announced this week and they hold off on release until June. And even that is still relatively short compared to some other consoles, like how the latest Xbox was announced about a year in advance and the PS5 was announced well over a year in advance. Not to mention that it feels like we've been hearing semi-plausible to legitimate leaks for this thing since well back into like mid 2024. Point being, everything feels like they almost certainly would have announced it by now. Now, why would it be delayed? Obviously, I don't know for certain. Maybe there was some kind of manufacturing defect, maybe there was an issue they had with one of the games they're planning to launch with, and they're waiting until these kinds of problems get sorted out. Like, I don't know. After all, the only thing I can imagine being worse than all of the insane amount of leaks coming out of Nintendo is them announcing the console and then being forced to delay the release due to one of these kinds of unforeseen reasons. I mean, has that even ever happened before to a major console manufacturer? I don't think it has, and I imagine it would be incredibly bad for business for a whole variety of reasons if it did. But like I said, I'll admit this is all pure doom and gloom speculation. Even if there is a reason for why they've delayed this announcement for so long, surely by the time they do announce it, these issues will have been sorted out. So let's try to change the mood a bit and just engage in some good old-fashioned speculation, because ultimately, I am still pretty hyped for the Switch 2, or whatever it ends up being called, but let's be honest, it's probably just going to be called the Switch 2. After all, the original Switch was just such a genius move by Nintendo. They were already the masters of the portable console game space, and they had clearly decided to go the route of offering home consoles that were cheaper with less raw power than their competition, combining the two spaces so that they didn't have to rely on two sets of games to support both divisions. Just kind of makes perfect sense, and I see no reason why they wouldn't want to continue that trend with the sequel. I mean, hell, if anything, I don't really see how they're supposed to go back to a split division after this, unless the Switch ended up being an absolute failure, which obviously it was not. I can only really see Nintendo making Switch-like hybrid consoles for the foreseeable future. I mean, why would you ever go back to the old way of doing things after this point? And ultimately, that makes what I want from a Switch 2 to be really simple. After all, I think what most people want is just kind of another Switch. If we're just talking big picture things, the long and short of it is that I basically just want to take the console that we already have, touch up the power level, and solve some basic quality of life issues, and then we can basically just call it a day. But we can also get a little bit more specific than that. Thankfully, the biggest thing that I and many other people are worried about is already confirmed: backwards compatibility. I mean, Nintendo would have to be the dumbest, most dinosaur ran company in the world to not include this feature. So you can understand why I was concerned. But thankfully, they did put out a tweet a while ago confirming that they will have backwards compatibility with Switch games on the new console, so we know that it will be the case. And like I said, they'd be moronic to not do this. The Switch has such a huge library of insane titles like Zelda to Kirby to Mario Odyssey. Hell, Mario Kart 8 is still one of the best-selling games of all time. Why not let it roll forward for the third console in a row? But yeah, this will give the Switch 2 a really solid library day one for people to play with. Not to mention that, let's be honest, the original Switch is definitely starting to show its age. Even some of the first-party titles, like the Zelda games, had their frame rates start to chug at least a little bit in certain areas, and when you go to third-party titles, things don't exactly get much better. Not to mention that a lot of games just run at 30 FPS, even if they are running at a consistent frame rate. So if the Switch 2 is at least powerful enough to run all of these games at a rock solid 60 without any issues, we're already off to a great start. I also like everything that I've seen so far in the leaks about the new Joy-Cons. I have to say that I think my biggest gripe with the old console is that if you're trying to hold it up in handheld mode, which I do a decent amount personally, especially while traveling, it's super easy for the Joy-Cons to slip out ever so slightly, and then it disconnects from the console, and that forces the game to pause and interrupt everything. And it's because the Joy-Cons slide upwards, which means that when you're holding it, the console itself wants to slide down with gravity, pulling itself free of the controllers. It's one of those issues where they clearly designed it for that whole dock transition thing like you see in the ads, but real life kind of revealed some flaws with that idea. But now, it seems like the Joy-Cons are going to slide in from the side, so it should be a lot more secure now, and it basically solves this problem. Other than that, the last big issue I had with the original is simply just the battery life, I guess. I mean, obviously it varies from game to game, but it'd be nice to have at least a bit more juice to work with this time around. And well, to be frank, I'm not sure what else there is to really say about it. I've heard that the Switch 2 is going to be a bit bigger this time around, so hopefully that means more room for more batteries and longer battery life, but it's also going to be more powerful, so who really knows? In terms of some other features I'd like to see, I mean, obviously the online stuff could always be improved. Nintendo is pretty consistently behind the times on that front. Not to mention the eShop just runs like trash. I mean, I don't even understand how that's possible. It's basically a glorified website. And of course, speaking of Nintendo Online, I wouldn't mind seeing them expanding the service to include GameCube games, maybe even Wii games. They could throw in like, DS stuff as well. Who knows? Just adding more games to that service I think would be a smart idea. But yeah, finally, there is of course then the big thing that I think we're all waiting for. What games is this thing gonna launch with? That has been a big point of speculation, and even the supposed leaks and rumors that I've seen so far haven't really given us any consistent answers. There's been some rumors of some ports and such, of things like putting the Master Chief Collection and Metal Gear Delta and whatnot on the console, and that all makes sense, but I'm talking about the brand new titles, the first party titles. Just what is Nintendo planning over there? Well, the first and most obvious choice, I think, is Metroid Prime 4. I mean, it's been teased for so long, with us only recently finally getting some real trailers for it, and they already announced it to be releasing in 2025. Something that well known and hyped for so long would be an obvious candidate for a majorly pushed first-party launch title to try and help drive console sales. Sure, Metroid is hardly on the same caliber as Mario or Zelda, but it's still pretty big. Speaking of, I highly doubt Zelda is going to be on the table. After all, Tears of the Kingdom only just came out in 2023, and those games take forever to make, and we just got Echoes of Wisdom a few months ago, so I doubt we're even going to see like a smaller Zelda game coming out at launch unless it's a port. Similarly, Mario Wonder wasn't that long ago, so that kind of rules 2D Marios off the table. I could see a 3D Mario coming out either at or around launch, and it could be a direct sequel to Odyssey, or maybe just something of a similar caliber. And I think that would make sense as a launch title, but they also could easily just put that out sometime within the first year or so, and I think that would make sense. There is also, of course, that new Pokemon Legends game that's already confirmed for this year as well. Hard to say if it'll be a launch title either, but Pokemon is one of the biggest franchises of all time. So even if it is a spin-off that we're talking about a pretty big potential seller here. Now, admittedly, I do have some rather, let's say, controversial opinions about Pokemon as of late. Maybe not so controversial depending on what circles you frequent, but I still can't deny that it is a powerhouse of a franchise that would be a strong selling point for a new console. Hell, the last Legends game sold nearly 15 million copies, and that was just a spin-off and the first of its kind. Combine that with the boost it'd get from being a launch title, and it would probably sell at least as much, if not more, than the mainline titles. And that's before even considering things like bundles and whatnot. So that's definitely a big contender for a launch title. Although another option that I don't think I see discussed as much is the potential for a new Kirby title. Again, not nearly the same caliber as Pokemon or Zelda, but few things are. The latest big new Kirby game was all the way back in early 2022, and after that, we just got a port of a Wii game. So I think that makes it plausible that we could be getting a new one at or around launch for the Switch too. Maybe a more traditional 2D title as opposed to a big 3D one, because I would expect that to have a faster turnaround time, but who knows. I do think it would be a good contrast with Metroid, though. Metroid could be the big 3D adventure game, more actiony and a bit more mature in its storytelling and whatnot, and then you'd have a nice, cute 2D Kirby game on the side to expand the demographics that they're appealing to. Again, we're talking about a console launch here. You want to try and appeal to as many people as possible. Just don't think about what happens at the end of most Kirby games. Some other big options, I think, include Animal Crossing and Mario Kart as well. Both of these games have been huge. I mean, they're number 13 and 5 on the list of best-selling games of all time, respectively. So surely Nintendo is thinking about these franchises pretty hard. Animal Crossing honestly feels the more likely to me out of the two in terms of day one launch titles. Although it is of course worth remembering that the last game did come out in some pretty ideal circumstances for a game that simulates living a normal life. So I don't know if any game in the franchise will ever be able to replicate those same numbers again. But on the other hand, that also means that tons of people got into Animal Crossing for the first time back in 2020, so maybe that's enough to drive up sales for the next game. But then, of course, we have Mario Kart. Now, Mario Kart is an interesting one because we haven't actually gotten a new entry in a really long time, so you might think that we're overdue for one. Mario Kart 8 came out for the Wii U after all. Technically, the Switch didn't get a new Mario Kart game at all. That game is well over 10 years old, too. So it's kind of a big deal, but it's also been so successful that they ended up just keeping to add more and more to it through DLC. I mean, it's gotten so much DLC at this point that the track count is just absurd. What is it now, 96 courses? I'm pretty sure that's twice as much as any other Mario Kart game. It's just insane. So that creates a problem though, because then how the hell do you follow up on that? It's basically the same issue that Smash Ultimate has right now. What are they going to do? Release Mario Kart 9 and have less courses and less content than the previous game? I just don't feel like that would be the smartest idea. Honestly, speaking of Smash, I feel like the logical place to go would be the somewhat popular idea, Super Smash Kart. I say lean into the crossover potential and try to get more Nintendo characters like Diddy Kong and such into this thing, as well as whatever third parties they can grab, like Sonic or Crash or whatever. Add some crazy new mechanics based around new characters and whatnot. I could see it work, because like I said, they need some kind of new hook to play around with, because I just don't see them releasing a new game in the series with less content and them just expecting people to just be okay with that. Otherwise, they might as well just port Mario Kart 8 forward into some kind of super deluxe version and keep releasing DLC for it. At least this way, they could try to eat their cake and have it too. I mean, the new console will already be backwards compatible with Mario Kart 8. Then Super Smash Kart could release alongside it, and then if it does well, they could support the new game and just build off from there. And then if it doesn't, then well, they can pivot back to Mario Kart and then try their hands at Mario Kart 9 later on down the line. But yeah, the last big game I can think of off the top of my head is, of course, Splatoon. Splatoon is pretty big and popular, all things considered, and it has had a pretty quick turnaround time sometimes. Splatoon 2 came out only a couple of years after the first game, and the latest game came out in 2022, so I think it's at least plausible that we could be looking at a Splatoon 4 as a launch title, or again, at least a near launch title for the new console. I've never personally been huge on Splatoon myself, but that's just kind of because I'm a mouse and keyboard kid for life when it comes to shooters like that. But I could at least see it as something to sweeten the pot for those of you that are interested in it. Of course, the real final option is whatever dark horse game Nintendo might be cooking up behind the scenes. Believe it or not, Nintendo does occasionally come up with new franchises from time to time, so I could see them coming up with something completely new and unexpected that will inevitably blow everyone away. I mean, if there's one thing Nintendo can do consistently, it's whatever people don't expect them to do. No idea what they'll do, but I mean, who knows? I mean, has Nintendo ever done anything in the roguelike genre? I could see that being an interesting space for them to play around in, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see if they actually pull out anything out of their hat like this. Though, I would expect at least one or more of the other options I've listed so far, like Metroid or whatever, to still launch alongside whatever this new game would end up being, just kind of as a safety precaution. They wouldn't want to pull the trigger on a brand new franchise for a brand new console and risk launching it as a dud without some kind of backup plan. So if they are planning to launch with some kind of big new unannounced title, I think it'll be alongside, Metroid or Pokemon or both or something like that, just to try and cover all of their bases. But yeah, I mean, I think that's all I got really. Overall, I do think the Switch 2 is in a pretty good spot. Like I said, the Switch 1 was already wildly successful, and I think that all that most people want out of the sequel is just for a slightly better version of the Switch that solves some of the gripes that people had with the first one. And I don't think it really needs to be much more than that to succeed. And again, just having backwards compatibility alone is really going to let them hit the ground running with this new console. Honestly, though, I just want Nintendo to finally announce the damn thing. We have been hearing about this console through one means or another for so goddamn long that it is just starting to get tiring. I just want something official so that we can stop all of these leaks and rumors and speculations and everything already. So hopefully the official announcement will come sooner rather than later. I mean, hell, it might happen literally right after I post this video for all I know. But in the meantime, as always, I am eager to continue the conversation in the comments down below. Let me know what you're expecting and hoping for the Switch 2 and what games you think might launch for it. Are you feeling optimistic like me, or do you have some more concerns that I didn't think about in this video? Either way, let me know down below. But for now, thank you all for watching, make sure to like and subscribe and all that jazz, and I hope to see you all in the next one.